Alright guys, today we're going to look at a real life example of natural selection. One of the problems Charles Darwin had with his theory was that it was hard to test because when you're talking about species evolving over time, it's hard to look at something that takes hundreds of years, thousands of years, even millions of years uh, to have the proof to back up what your claims are. But kind of along the same times that he's coming up with his theory, natural selection was occurring in the in the forests around Europe during the Industrial Revolution. And what was going on was there was changes in this moth population, they're called the peppered moth. And basically, the story behind it is, if you look down here, you see two different color moths. They're the same species. There's a darker colored moth and a lighter colored peppered moth, and they generally sit on the bark of trees during the day, and they fly around at night. But during the day is when they're preyed upon by the bird population. And if you look at this tree bark covered in lichen, which is a mix between a fungus and an algae, uh, you see that the light moths tend to blend in a little bit better on the black on the white bark with the lichen than the black moths do. So prior to the Industrial Revolution, the white moths made up a majority of the population. Over 98% of the moths in the population were this light color, or very few were darker color. But what was observed was after the Industrial Revolution and the buildup of soot on the tree, generally darkening the bark of the trees, scientists started to see more black moths in the population and less of the light colored moths. So if we go over here, um, what they did first was they studied the moths themselves, and it was found that the color was genetic. They saw that the moths passed their color to the next generation. So what they were able to find out were eggs from the light colored moths developed into light moths, and dark moth eggs turned into dark adults. So they didn't know much about DNA mutations at the time, but we could we know now that the dark color was caused by a mutation in the DNA of a single moth, and that the mutated gene had been passed to its offspring. All right, so this told the scientists, well, why were there dark moths and why were there light moths? But it didn't tell them why were there more dark moths in the population as the industrial revolution progressed. All right, so tied in with Charles Darwin's theory was, well, moths are born with variations or differences, and they're going to struggle to survive. In this case, who's going to be better adapted to hiding in the environment? And some of the moths are going to be eaten by predators more easily than others. The ones who are better hidden will have a advantage over the ones that are not as well hidden, and they'll survive to reproduce and pass on those traits that help keep them alive. All right, so over the course of about 50 years, as the Industrial Revolution progressed, they noticed that the population of moths changed, and instead of having a majority of light moths and very few dark moths, they found that uh, it kind of reversed, where you had a lot more dark moths than you did light moths in the population. Okay, so if we kind of go back here to uh, this little game we could play, and this link will be up. You guys could try this game if you can. If the link doesn't work, you can kind of just follow along with me. I'm gonna play. I'll play in the light forest and the dark forest. So if I play in the light forest, this would be prior to the Industrial Revolution, when the bark of the trees was still lighter colored, not covered in soot and such. So let's take a look. So I'm the bird. I have to eat as many moths as I can, and as I fly around and chomp on these moths, oh, missed. It's much easier for me to eat the darker colored moths because I'm trying to eat as many as I can, and they're just standing out a lot more. Oh, I see some light ones over there. Alright. You guys, if you try this, you could maybe send us your scores, post your scores. I think my highest was 60 or something one year. I'm not doing that well right now. Oh, I'm grabbing some light ones there. But what they're going to tell us in this game is it started off 50% light and 50% dark colored moths, and we'll see how that ends up at the end based on, this is natural selection. The bird is just kind of choosing or eating whichever prey stands out to it the easiest. Alright, so the ones that are a little more well hidden, they might not. Okay, that was the end of a minute. That went quick. Alright, so I ate 52 moths. We started with 50% light and 50% dark moths, and now there's 92% light moths and 8% dark moths. So if we look at the population, it started at 50% light moths, if you look down here where my mouse is, and 50% dark moths. And because I was eating more dark moths, the population of the dark moths decreased over time, and the population of the light moths increased over time. So over the 60 seconds, obviously it doesn't happen that fast in real time, but over the course of the game, the population of light moths increased dramatically over the dark moths. So in this forest, these light moths would survive and reproduce. There'd be more light moths born into the next generation than there would be dark moths. And that's kind of what happened prior to the Industrial Revolution. So if I go back now and I'm going to play a game in the dark forest. So this is after the Industrial Revolution, or during the Industrial Revolution, where the trees are covered in soot. We could see that it's probably, I would say, my hypothesis would be it would be the opposite. I think the light moths would probably stand out and get eaten more easily than the dark. Oh, and there they are. I actually don't even see any dark. Oh, there's a couple. But these light ones, you just gotta grab them while you see them because they're easy to grab instead of looking around for the dark ones. Alright, so I do see some of the dark ones flying around, but just like the other forest, it's a lot easier to see the contrasting color in the game. How much time do I've got? About 15 seconds left. Alright. Oh, 61 that time. So we started with 50% light and 50% dark, and now there's 40% light and 60% dark moths. So let's look at the graph again. We started with 50%. The light moth population fell off, alright, drastically. It did start to make a little bit of a comeback there, but I think there was very few light moths in the population, so I was trying to eat all the dark ones that I could find. So kind of the opposite happened here. We saw a decrease in the light moth population and an increase in the dark moth population. So if the forest were to stay like this for an extended period of time, you'd see the dark moths have an advantage with their variation, and you'd see more dark moths being born in the future because they're less likely to be eaten than the light moth population. Alright, so I'm going to post a link to this so you guys can try the game. You could read through, click and read through about the peppered moth and Charles Darwin's idea, or how natural selection tied into this. And if you do play the game, there you go. There's my best out of the two games. I got a 61. So if you beat me, maybe take a screenshot of this and post it so I believe you, or you could just pretend and say you got 65 or whatever. All right. So let me escape out of this and close this window. Alright guys, have a nice day.